I'm going to be tying for you for 1 hour tonight, and we're going to go through a couple of flies that I've tied over the years that have been really useful to me. I know they showed a picture of me with a striper in New York City. I'm talking to you guys from Georgia. You can see I got my Georgia Go Dogs hat on there. So we're talking to you from Hotlanta. So I now guide for striped bass, Kentucky spots, largemouth, and one of my favorites, carp. And the flies we're going to tie tonight, while they are saltwater inspired, they could be tied down to trout size for you guys that want to throw streamers. It's a streamer seminar basically for us tonight. So before we get started right now, let's start first. I can't tie without at least telling a quick joke. So before I start, I'm going to ask you guys a question. And the first guy who gets on Instagram and can give me the answer to this question, we're going to give away a prize tonight. We're going to give away Jeff Freihover's F350. He has a beautiful F350 in red with a camper top on the back. And Jeff's the president, CEO of Umpqua Feather Merchants. We're going to give his truck away tonight to the first guy who can answer this question. What does the moon have in common with the University of Clemson? Does anybody know? I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Well, they both control the tide. For any of you Alabama fans out there. All right, we're done with that. Let's start off tying tonight. Okay, so here we go, guys. The first fly we're going to tie tonight is a fly I call the Coyote. And the Coyote was a fly I designed back in around 1992. I grew up in New York City, and I didn't start fly fishing until around 90 when I was living in Connecticut. But back through the 70s and 80s, I used to fish off the rocks using conventional tackle, catching striped bass right in the throngs of New York City. And our number one lure was what was called a Blakemore Roadrunner. And for anybody who doesn't know what a Blakemore Roadrunner is, it's basically a bucktail jig with a spinner blade attached to it. And you can see that. And what we would do is dress that with bucktail or put a soft plastic on the back of it. And where most guys were fishing bucktail jigs, I was fishing this Roadrunner with the spinner blade, and I was out fishing guys 3-to-1, 4-to-1 down on the rocks in New York City constantly. So when I started fly fishing back in the early 90s and I started tying my own flies, I said, I need a fly that's going to act like that Roadrunner. And I had seen a Clouser minnow back then. Obviously, it was the hottest fly. Everybody was fishing a Clouser. But I wanted something that was sort of supercharged. So long story short, we came up with the Coyote. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read you first. Here's what we got going for what you're going to need to tie the Coyote. The hook is a Tiemco 811 S, a 1/0. The thread we're going to use is mono 0.006 fine. We're going to need 40-pound test mono for a spike. You're going to need a dumbbell eye in around a medium size. You're going to need a barrel swivel. We're going to need a barrel swivel in a size 14, a split ring in a size 8, a stainless split ring, a spinner blade in either a size double 8 is really the one that I like the best, or a willow leaf if it's a size 8 or a 1. You're going to need zonker, white zonker, bucktail, whatever color you want to tie this in, flash, whatever, crystal flash, whatever you want. We're going to also have a throat in there of hot pink fluorofiber. And finally, we're going to have a little pearl braid, a little Bill's body braid. So that's basically what the recipe is for this fly. So here we go. We're going to start. We're going to take our 1/0 Tiemco 811S, and we're going to take our barrel swivel, and we're going to just slide that barrel swivel through the point onto up the hook shank right at the eye of the hook. And we're just going to leave that there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our thread, and right here we're using, again, mono thread. I tie a lot of my flies, guys, with mono. And the reason I like to tie with mono is because when I get up to the head of the fly, I don't want a big old white clump sitting on the head of the fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie with mono, and then this way, when I get done, whatever color I ended up putting up there, whether it's chartreuse or whatnot, it's going to bleed through and show the colors beautifully. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put so we made our little bump in there, the mountains, as I call them. And now we're going to tie our eyeballs on. This is an eyeballs dumbbell eye. It's a medium. And we're just going to straighten that out and tie it down and give it a couple of over and unders just to lock the thread in using the mono. Oops. There we go. Much better. Okay, once I get that done, guys, this is something I like to do all the time. I like to take a shot of light curing adhesive, and I'm using up the last of my clear cure goo, and after that I'm going to be moving over to my solar res, and I'm using the thinnest viscosity for this. And all I'm going to do is put a little dab on both sides of the eyes, because you can try using super glue, but what I have found is that super glue, unfortunately, it will still spin when you're in a boat and you hit the motor or you hit a rock. But when you hit it with the light curing adhesive, this thing is locked in. It's beautiful. So we're all locked in right now. We've got our light curing adhesive on there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of 40-pound test monofilament, like so. And we're going to take one end of it and we're going to actually cut it on an angle. We're going to actually make a point on one end of the mono. I don't know if you can see that on there, but it is a point. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to tie this on the back, right behind the eye, and all the way down the shank of the hook. And what we're really creating here, guys, is what we call a mono spike. I know a lot of guys like to use a mono loop to stop rabbit from fouling. I'm a big fan of the mono spike. I really like a mono spike. So now we've got that tied on there. And the very next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our zonker strip. And guys, we're just talking about a package of rabbit, just simple white zonker strip. We'll take out a piece. And what we're going to do is we're going to place this zonker strip with the hook and the vise riding point down. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to place this zonker strip back on the hook. We're going to have it fur down. We're not going to have it. Most people think, well, it's much easier to tie the hide onto the top of the hook. We don't want to do that. We want to tie this fur to the hook. And the reason we want to tie fur to the hook is because this fly is going to ride hook up like this, like a clouser would. And the difference is, if we have it riding like this, you want the hide that absorbs water to actually flip the fly and keep it riding hook up. So it's really important that we put the fur to the hide, to the hook shank. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right to the edge here. We're going to hold it with our thumb and our forefinger, and we're going to measure and come off just about a ½ an inch off the back of the hook, off the bend in the hook, like so. I'm holding it about a ½ inch. I'm going to turn that so you can see it. I'm going to grab that with my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm going to take a bodkin, and I'm going to push a hole through the rabbit strip. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that point that I made, and I'm actually going to go through the fur, out the hide, like so. Okay? And now I'm going to take that rabbit strip and place it exactly where I want it, at the front. Make sure that that blade, the barrel swivel, is not in the way. And we're going to lash that down. It doesn't have to look pretty. Push everything back, go over the top, and we're going to tie this rabbit right to the bend in the hook, just like so. Okay, so we've got our rabbit secured onto the fly. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of flat braid, Bill's body braid in pearl. And you don't have to do this. I like to do it because it gives it a clean look. And what we're going to do is we're going to place that on in the back of the fly where we just tied. We're going to come up, and now all we're going to do is clean up that rabbit and just palmer the pearl's body braid around the shank of the, around the shank of the hook. Let's try that again. We're going to palmer it around the shank of the hook, and we're going to tie it off right behind the eye. So right there, we've now got our Bill's body braid on there, and that cleans everything up really nicely. Okay, now we're going to flip the fly back over on the vise. So this is the way it's going to ride when you throw this. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of flash. So in this case, I like crystal flash. I'm a big fan of silver crystal flash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a couple of pieces. I'm not a big flash guy, so I'm not going to be using a lot of flash. I'll probably just use a couple pieces on each side. So I'm going to take it. When I work with flash, guys, I like wetting my flash. Makes it much easier to control. So I'm going to wet my flash. I'm going to tie that down on one side of the hook. Make sure I got it just where I want. Tie it down. Now I'm going to come over. I'm going to cut it. I know a lot of guys like to wrap it just around the thread, or I'll come around on the other side of the hook and do that. I find sometimes I don't get a really good lie on my flash if I do that. So I'm just going to come in and tie the flash on both sides. It just makes it easier. Okay, now we've got our flash on there, silver. Now here comes the most important part of the fly, in my opinion. Guys, there's a material out there that I've been using for years. It's called fluorofiber. It's brought in by Just Add H2O, our friends at the Fishing Group. Renzetti actually brings this in for everybody. Our friends who make these wonderful master vices and all their vices, which I think are fantastic. These guys also bring in materials. They're not just a vice manufacturer. They bring in a lot of great synthetic materials from South Africa. And guys, here's what I love about this material. When you tie a deceiver, everybody is used to putting a little red throat on the back of their deceiver. Well, I'll tell you what I learned 100 years ago from a guy by the name of Paul Van Reenen, who actually brought this material into the United States. He told me this material comes in 50 colors, but it's the hot pink. That's the stuff that is the game changer on these flies. If you notice, you can see that this package is hot pink, but depending on how the light hits it, it changes to a salmon, to a hot orange. It changes to a lot of different colors, just depending on how the light reflects off of this material. And when you're fishing for into a school of baitfish where there's thousands of baitfish and they got to pick your fly out, we have found that tying your fly with a little bit of a throat or a gill plate using the fluorofiber is a difference maker. I've been in a boat, and I can't tell you guys, I've tried this 1,000 times, well, 100 times, where somebody's fishing a basic clouser and just an olive oval white clouser in salt water and fresh water, wherever. And then the next guy in the boat is fishing a clouser with this on the throat. And the guy using the fluorofiber is out fishing the guy using the non-fluorofibered clouser 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1. And so we bite the fly off and we swap. And now the guy with the fluorofiber who wasn't fishing it before is now out fishing his buddy. So I tie a lot of my flies and I put this stuff in as a throat, and it makes a huge difference. This is the original package from back 100 years ago called Success Flies, and it's the same stuff. So we're going to just we're going to use this package up before we open up the new one. We're just going to take out a clump of this, and you'll see how little I'm actually putting in. We'll just dispense a little bit out of this. We'll make a cut, and we're going to even that out. And we've got plenty in here right now. I'm just going to fold it in half because I don't use a lot on this, guys. I'm telling you, it is just for a throat. So we're going to turn this back over, And we're actually going to put in a little bit back here, and then we're going to bunch it over itself. We're going to cut the excess off, and that is it. That is all you need on these flies to make a difference. And guys, we're tying a coyote, but if you were to do this to just a plain Clouser minnow, I can't tell you the difference it's going to make on how many more fish you're going to have going after your fly. This fluorofiber is, to me, is an absolute game changer. Okay, next we're going to take bucktail, and any color bucktail, guys, and whatever you're comfortable with. I like chartreuse, and so we're going to tie off a clump of chartreuse bucktail, and we're going to put that on the fly. Okay, now here's a little tip for when you're working with bucktail. Okay, so everybody knows how bucktail tends to flare, and you get pieces of bucktail and you sit there going, oh, I'm going to take this one out and I'm going to take this one out and blah, 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 blah. Well, I got a better one for you. All right. This is what we always do. I learned this many, many years ago. When your bucktail is flaring, and let's just show you what I mean. When your bucktail is flaring like this, and you want to get it to be less unruly, if you'll just take your thumb and your forefinger, grab it by the butt, take your other hand, your thumb and your forefinger, and start at the back and roll it. Roll your bucktail, intertwine it to one inside one another like that. And you'll see your bucktail doesn't flare much anymore. Just roll it a couple times and your bucktail is going to lay beautiful. So we've got that done. Now we're going to just measure off what we need. We'll put that, give it one more roll, and we're ready to place that on the hook. We need it right there. We'll cut off our excess. We're going to wind forward. We're going to lay our bucktail right on the nose, right in front of the eye, between the eye and the barrel swivel. Guys, what I have to tell you is you don't want to tie over your barrel swivel. If you tie over your barrel swivel and don't allow this barrel swivel to swing freely, after hooking 3 or 4 fish, you're going to find you're going to break your barrel swivel, and that means your spinner blade's going to fall off and you're back to a rabbit clouser instead of a coyote. So we're going to tie that on there. We're pretty much done now, guys. We're going to whip finish. Perfect. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change this from a clouser to a coyote right now. So the first thing now we're going to have to do is we're going to have to add our spinner blade to this. Now, guys, I'm going to try and hold this up and let you guys see. There are 3 kinds of spinner blades available to you guys to use. You see the one that says W? That's a willow leaf blade. That's an elongated blade. That is a blade that we use when we're in crystal clear water, okay? Because it gives off a lot of flash. The next blade in the middle is called an Indiana blade. That's why I've got it labeled I. An Indiana blade is actually what you saw on the Blakemore Roadrunner picture I showed you. An Indiana blade is teardropped, and a teardrop blade gives you a little bit of flash and it gives you a little bit of vibration. So that's usually the blade of choice that if you're not sure what kind of water you're going into, an Indiana blade is probably a good choice. The last blade, you see we've got a C on there. That's a very rounded. Colorado blade gives off almost no flash. It's all about vibration. So if you said to me, I'm fishing in tannic water where you really can't see the bottom, the Colorado blade is the choice. If you're fishing in gin clear water, the willow leaf blade is your choice. And if you're not sure what you're going to encounter, then just go with an Indiana blade. So with that, we're going to use an Indiana blade right now. So what you're going to need to do to attach the blade to the barrel swivel is you're going to need to get yourself a pair of split ring pliers. You notice there's a little notch in there. That's to open up the split ring. So I grab the split ring like so, and you can see I've got it in there. And now I'm going to twist it until I can find that opening. And then I'm going to open it with my pliers, hopefully, like so. Okay, I was able to open it and grab it. Now I'm going to grab my Indiana blade, and I'm going to slide it right onto the opening, swivel it around so it locks in. And now while it's still open, I'm going to now affix it to the barrel swivel, and I'm going to spin that so it locks in. And there you have your Coyote is 99% complete. And you can see I can still turn. I've put that thread, I've nosed it up so that the barrel swivel is locked in place in between the eye of the hook and the thread base that I built up. So it still allows it to swing freely, but I really want it to stay in this down position as I'm fishing the fly. So now the last thing we're going to do, we made that mono spike back when we started tying this, and we still got this big piece of mono hanging out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off a little bit of that mono so you can see I still have a spike in there. What we want to do is we don't want to allow this rabbit to back out of the mono, or what'll happen is having a rabbit strip with no anti-fouling device in the back of it, whether it's a spike or a loop, it can foul. And when I say foul, guys, this is what rabbit tends to do. Rabbit, because it's so supple, tends to do this, and that's no good. So that's what this mono spike allows for that not to happen. So I've got that spike in here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a cigarette lighter, and I'm just going to put a little burr in the mono spike. I'm going to blow it out. I'm going to let that mono spike, that little burr that I put in, harden. Just like that. And you can see this thing is about dry right now. And now there's absolutely no way for this rabbit to back out of this spike. Guys, this is one of my best searching patterns. I use this for largemouth bass, stripers, snook patterns. I use this for largemouth bass, stripers, snook, anything that'll swim. I know one of my good buddies, Mr. Brad Beefus from Scientific Anglers, says that this is his go-to smallmouth fly. We've been using this for stripers and snook for many, many, many years. And you can change the eye and put on something like a bead chain if you want it to sink if you're fishing shallower water, or you need it to sink a little more slowly. But this is our Coyote, and it's just a really good pattern. That rabbit makes that fly breathe and move like no other. It's just a really, really great fly. So that's our Coyote. So that's our first fly for tonight. Okay. Our second fly tonight we're going to talk to you about is called a darting baitfish. And the darting baitfish, everybody today is tying baitfish patterns, a la Popovic style flies or Puglisi style flies. This fly really gets its roots from our buddies out on the West Coast. That kind of inspired me on this fly. And what we're going to need, here's your recipe list for the darting baitfish. We're going to be tying with a 1/0 60-degree bend jig hook, and Umpqua's 506, their 506H is a great hook. And I think I've got a pack of them here somewhere. It's the S506H. And there we go, the S506H. This is a size 1. We're tying this one a little bigger. We're tying this in a 1/0. I ran out of my 1/0s about 3 days ago, so I'm waiting for a replacement. So I'm using a sub hook. Doesn't matter what brand it is, because the only brand you need to know about is the S506H. So you're going to need an S506H 60-degree bend jig hook. We're going to use mono thread. For a weight, we're going to be using what's known as a tungsten scud weight. We'll talk about that in a minute. Tungsten scud weight. That comes from Hairline. Our friends at Hairline make those. We're going to need Bill's body braid again in flat, the flat body braid in pearl. We're going to be using basically 2 materials for this fly. We're going to be using the wing, and the underbelly is going to be in crystal flesh. That's a synthetic material, again, brought in from South Africa. Our Renzetti buddies all bring that stuff in. So crystal flesh, guys, you could sub this with SF Flash Blend, or you could use Flash and Slinky, or any of the synthetic materials that'll give that fly the baitfish shape that you're comfortable with. I like the Crystal Flash. We're going to use hot pink fluorofiber again. We're going to put some peacock curl on the top of this thing, and then we're going to need some 3D epoxy eyes. So that's what we're going to be doing as far as with our fly this time. So let's get started. Now, the reason I really like 60-degree bend jig hooks is because, and this kind of, this was made popular by the folks out on the West Coast. Dan Blanton really popularized fishing 60-degree bend jig hooks. It actually started with a gentleman in Texas, a striper guy down on Lake Texoma named George Glasner. And George was really the first one to start playing with these things back in the early 80s. So, but Dan kind of popularized it by the end of the 90s. And what I really love about these hooks is your fly is going to ride hook up, number one. Number two, what's really interesting about a 60-degree bend jig hook is that when you're fighting a fish and you're pulling against a fish, when you have a J hook without that 60-degree notch like this, when you're pulling hard against a fish, you can pull the fly out of the fish's mouth and lose fish. But with a 60-degree bend jig hook, with that leader coming off this way on an angle, as you're pulling, you're actually creating a lever. So it's pulling down and it's actually sinking the fly further into the fish's mouth. So that's why 60-degree bend jig hooks have become very popular of late. They're a really great hook to tie with, and I'd suggest you try them. Guys are tying them with nymphs. They're tying them on bonefish flies and crabs, and we're tying them on baitfish flies for both fresh and saltwater usage. So that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our 60-degree bend jig hook in the vise. We got it in there. The next part is to add our tungsten scud weight. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by tying halfway back, maybe even 2/3 of the way back on the jig hook. Now, let me show you what a package of this stuff looks like. This is what we call tungsten scud weights. And you can see they sort of look like a shrimp back. And they come in 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. And they're made out of tungsten, so they're really nice and heavy. And we're going to take the large size for this fly. And we're going to tie the large size on. What we're going to do is we're going to place that fly on the back. We're going to place that tungsten the tungsten weight on the back of the hook shank. Now, normally, guys, when you tie your weight on a fly, most of us tie your weights on the front of the fly. This is really good stopping point to discuss this for a minute. When you tie, where you put your weight on a fly will determine how a fly is going to move. For instance, if you put a bead on the front of your fly like you would on a beadhead woolly bugger, the fly is going to nose down. It's going to dive. When you strip, fly is going to come up and nose down, come up and nose down when you put all your weight in the front of the fly. When you're tying a bonefish fly or a clouser type fly, you're putting your weight about 1/3, 1/4 to 1/3 of the way back on the hook shank. What that does is it allows your fly to come up and sink evenly and come up and sink evenly. That's what putting your weight on the front of the, about 1/3 of the way back on the fly does. When you keel weight a fly, we call this keel weighting. And again, this comes from the West Coast. A guy by the name of Dave Sellers came out with this fly called an SST, which is a Sellers striper teaser. And he keel weighted his fly by putting some weight even further back on the back, off the rear of the fly. And the purpose of keel weighting is that when you strip your fly with a sharp stop and pop action, having the weight on the back of the fly makes it want to jackknife. So the back wants to come to the front. This allows you to get a side-to-side darting action underwater by giving it a hard strip and a stop and a hard strip and a stop. So that's what the purpose of keel weighting will do. So we keel weight this fly by putting this tungsten scud weight on the back. Once we got that down, we're now going to take some more of the flat braid and we're just going to wet it. And we're going to tie forward. We don't care how pretty this looks because this is all going to disappear at the end of this. Is just to keep that scud weight from moving and rolling. We're just protecting it. That's all we're doing. Okay, we go behind, then in front a couple times. You could, if you wanted, and you didn't want to put this on here, again, with the material I'm using tonight, the crystal flesh, I don't even really need to put this bead of braid on here. I could just take my light curing adhesive, put it over the top of it, and I'd be good to go. But if you're going to use a material that's going to be a little more translucent and using less, like Farrar's Flash Blend, SF Flash Blend, or Slinky, Flash and Slinky, you tend to see this through there. So, you know, and if that's the case, you really want to cover it up. It's nice to put a little bit of flash in there. Okay, so we've got that on. So the next thing is, let's put on our crystal flesh. Let me show you what the crystal flesh looks like in the package. That's the crystal flesh. Again, this is South African material. You can see it comes in an array of colors. Tonight, we're going to be tying with olive and white. So we're going to use olive and white crystal flesh for this fly. Okay, guys, what I'm going to tell you is this. This is the secret to tying a really good baitfish pattern, is don't use a lot of material. Okay, look how little I'm taking. Don't take big clumps. The smaller the amount of material you use, the more translucent the fly is going to look, and the better it's going to come out looking at the end of the tie. So we're going to go back out. We're probably going to go back out about, we're going to make this fly about 3.5 to 4 inches long. And on the top here, we're just going to tie down a little bit loosely and a couple of loose wraps. And then we're just going to roll this material around and then tie it down. Okay. And that's going to be our belly or our underbelly. Then we're going to take our olive. Once again, we're not taking a lot, guys. Less is more when you're tying these types of flies. We're going to take our olive, we're going to flip the fly up, and what we're going to do is we're going to measure the same length that we just put the white on. You're going to go back the same exact length, and we're going to tie right over the top of it. We're going to give a pinch, tie it down. We're going to take off our excess. Okay. Now, guys, here's the key when you're tying baitfish patterns. The key is you're going to keep moving up the shank of the hook. And every time you tie on another layer, what we call over-under, some guys call it a high tie. I really call it an over-under because we're tying on top and then underneath and back and forth until we get to the eye of the hook. What you're going to do is every time you come forward, you're going to tie a little bit shorter. You can see that I am about a 1/2 inch shorter on this tie-in point. So we're going to tie, once again, we're going to pinch it down and we're going to tie our olive on. We're going to take the excess off. Again, don't worry about it. We're going to clean everything up at the very end. Then we're going to turn around. We're going to take our white, go back down the other side, come in again a little bit shorter than what we just did our last tie. We're going to tie that down. Take off the excess. And guys, this is all you need to do for the rest of this fly is just keep tying, coming in a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter every time. I'm going to take another small clump of material. We're going to take the white. We're going to come in a little bit shorter this time. And I will tell you that the more clumps, don't rush this, the more clumps that you come in with, the nicer this fly is going to look at the end of this session. We got that on there. Again, don't worry about if there's some threads hanging in there. If there's little pieces, we're going to clean all that up at the end. We're going to take another shot and take that off. We'll come in again, a little bit shorter than the last tie-in. We'll bring it in, tie it down. Tie it off. Come back. Now with our white again, go back to the other side. Get it in there a little shorter. And I just keep moving up that shank of the hook. Come in a little bit shorter. Guys, you could tie this thing trout size. You could put this easily on a size 6 or a size 8 and make a little kind of a bait fish, a little shad or a little dace. Same thing. Come in a little shorter. Tie it down. Okay. I'm going to come in one more time. Get it lined up perfectly. Come in and tie it a little shorter. Take that off. And now finally, we've got one more tie-in. Now, guys, this is where I like to put my fluorofiber. We're back to using our hot pink fluorofiber. I'm going to take a small portion of it. Once again, I'm going to tie that in. Now, if you're a flash guy, some guys really like to put a lot of flash on their flies. And if you're that guy, well, then what I would tell you is this should be your last tie-in right here. But I'm not a big flash guy. So what I like to do is I like to cover my fluorofiber up with a little bit more white material right at the very end. I like to hide it. I just want it to have just a little bit of flash in there, not too much. Okay, now I've got that tied off, and I'm just going to make a head out of that. Let's get that back up here. I lost it. There we go. All right, we'll take our whip finisher. Come on. And we're just going to put a couple of 2 or 3 or 4 turns on there. And we're pretty much getting to the end of this. Tie that off. All right. Now we're going to put this fly to the test. We're going to preen everything out. All I do is with my fingers, I just start preening all the materials so that it just needs to go. Okay? And now I got to give this fly a haircut because I want this thing to look more, this kind of looks like Don King's hair. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a long nose scissor, something with a longer blade, and we're actually going to trim it. And the way I trim my baitfish flies, guys, is I trim it by I make a V cut to the back on the top and a V cut up from the bottom. And when I do that, when I make V cuts, let's see if I can kind of move this right here for a minute so you guys can see this. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so I'm going to make a V cut down. And then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to make a V cut down again. And I'm going to start trimming this, rounding it a little, making it a V cut. Always making the cut to go to the V. And you can see I'm starting to get a baitfish shape to this fly. And you can trim this until your heart's content. And you got it just the way you want it to look. All right. And this is pretty good right now. I think I've got a pretty nice baitfish look on this thing. So now the next thing we're going to do, just to give it a little more contrast, we're now going to add some peacock curl to our fly. We don't need a lot, just a little bit. So I'm going to tie my thread back on to the nose now that it's been trimmed. And I'm going to take, I don't know, half a dozen pieces of peacock. And I'm going to put it right at the nose here. And I'm going to tie that down. So now we've basically got, for the most part, this fly has got almost all synthetics throughout the whole thing, except you've got some natural peacock right at the head. Okay, we've got that. And now we're just going to whip finish that off right at the head. Okay, trim it. Now what we need to do is we want this peacock curl to lay with the fly. You can see it's not. It's standing straight up. And the way we get that to change, we'll put this back in the vise. We're going to grab the peacock curl, and with our scissors, like you would with a ribbon, we're going to just flow it back like that. We'll do that a couple of times. And what that's going to do, it's going to put a bend in the hurl. And you'll see now this thing will bend perfectly to shape. Give it a little bit of a dark back, because all baitfish have some contrast on their back. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle on this is going to be to put some eyes on there. This fly needs to be able to see. And so all our baitfish have eyes. We're going to take some 3D eyes. These are epoxy 3D eyes. Let me show you what, and everybody's making these today, guys. These are some old CCG 3D eyes, and the size on these is 8mm. All right, this is an 8mm epoxy 3D eye. You can buy, I'm sure if you look in the Umpqua catalog, Met's probably has it, or somewhere in there they've got it. Now, normally, guys, if I'm putting my eyes on and I want them to lock in forever, it would be best to use some sort of a goop, like a shoe goop or something like that, and then press them on with the goop, put a clothespin on there, leave it overnight, and those eyes will never come off. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to use some of this super glue in the gel form, and it works really well. If we put that on there, it'll hold really nicely. So we've got that on there, got some on, and we're just going to lay that right down on the fly. I'm going to hold it on one side, give it about 10 seconds, and it will lock into place. Now we're going to take the other eye, and we're going to do the same thing on this side. I think eyes are really, really important on a fly, especially on baitfish patterns. I think they're vital, because I think the fish, our game fish, look to go after the eye. I think they key in on the eye. So there you go. So here we've got, and again, you can trim this again as much as you want. This is on a size 1/0. It's really translucent, does not have a lot of material. I could throw this thing as a 1/0 with this tungsten weight. I could throw this with a 6 weight, no problem. Absolutely no problem. But again, if you give this thing a hard strip and a stop, this fly is going to dart right and left, as opposed to just keep going up and down. It'll have some really wacky movement. And so this is called our darting baitfish. So that's our second fly for tonight. Really good pattern. One of my go-tos in my lakes down here, as well as this will be a baby bunker for anybody who's fishing the surf, or fishing the Northeast, or you could use it as a small mullet fly if you're fishing the Texas coast or Florida. Another really good pattern. Okay. Finally, the last fly we're going to tie. See how we're doing on time here, guys. We got 15 minutes just about, maybe a little less. So we're going to kind of boogie through this. The next fly we're going to tie is a fly that I've been using for redfish now for the last few years, and it's been really, really good. It's called a Redfish Scampi. This is another fly that Umpqua has in their quiver for me. The Bonefish Scampi has been out for years. On the Redfish Scampi, let me give you really quickly the recipe. So we're using, once again, an S506H 60-degree bend jig hook from sizes 1 to 4. This happens to be a size 1. Dumbbell eyes, you can use a medium dumbbell eye, a large dumbbell eye if you're tying it bigger. You can use B-chain eye if you wanted to, if you're fishing redfish in super skinny water and it can't make a lot of noise, but we're going to use a medium dumbbell eye. You're going to need mylar cord for this fly, or you can use crystal flash, gold crystal flash. You're going to need a zonker strip. You're going to need either polar fiber or craft fur. You're going to need a brown Sharpie, and the thread we're using is going to be Flymaster in a tan. We tie this in rust and in tan, 2 colors. Tonight we're going to tie the tan one. So this is 210. This is Flymaster 210 in a tan color. So that's our recipe on this tonight. All right. So all we're going to do, we're going to start. Once again, we're going to affix the eyes on the front of this fly on the Redfish Scampi. Guys, this is a fly that you can tie. We tie it as a carp fly. We call it the carp scampi. We got the bonefish scampi. And for those guys that fish the mysis shrimps, you can tie this as a trout fly if you want. So all we're going to do is we're going to lock in our thread on our hook with our dumbbell eye. And then we're going to tie to the back here. Once again, for my purposes, I like to lock my eyes in with a little bit of light curing adhesive. Okay, give it a shot with the light. There we go. Great. That is now locked in. Okay, now you're going to need to take the, where did it go? Mylar. We've got Mylar in size small or medium, your choice. Guys, when you take Mylar out of the package, it's going to come, it's going to have a string inside of it. You're going to need to pull that string out so that it is hollow. You can also get away, if you didn't want to use this material, you could also get away with just using, for this next step, gold crystal flash. Your choice. I like it with the Mylar because it's a little quicker, but absolutely makes no difference. And just like you would tie a bonefish scampi or a gotcha, we're going to tie that Mylar on the back, come forward, and then all we're going to do is twist the Mylar up the hook shank, like so. Come on. There we go. Just cover it all on the hook shank. Perfect. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tie it off right at the nose of the fly. Okay. Once we've got that secured, we're going to cut off the excess, hoping we don't cut our fly, which we didn't. Great. All right. So we've got our gold braid on there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually attach the rabbit. You need a piece of zonker strip. So here I've got a patch of rabbit. I've already pre-cut it to save some time. I'm going to measure where this is going to be on the front of the fly, and then I'm going to measure where the hook point is, come to the back of the fly, and I'm going to put my thumb and my forefinger there, And I'm actually going to, again, poke a hole in the rabbit hide, like so, making a nice hole in the rabbit hide. Now I'm going to take my fly out of the vise. And again, we want this fly riding hook up. So you're going to go from the hide through the fur, in this case. Pull it down. And secure the rabbit on to the fly like so. Very simple. The last piece of the puzzle, we're going to use some golden retriever. I don't know if you knew this, but Umpqua, not only do they use craft fur and they can get you polar fiber, they also use golden retriever. They actually skin golden retriever to get some really great fur. No, I'm kidding. This is craft fur. All right, so we're going to take some tan craft fur or tan polar fiber, either one. I like them both. And we're going to cut a little off. When you're working with craft fur or polar fiber, you grab it by the butts and you're going to pull off all the fluff off the back of it. You don't want any of that fluff while you're working with this stuff. Okay, now I'm looking at the front and I want to get a good taper. So I'm going to actually kind of use my fur in my hands to kind of just get it to stack. Because you don't need a lot. We're going to use it as a wing. We'll cut off from the back. We're going to tie that right down on the, right down. Oh, come on. It's not working. Came a little too far up on this one. Fellas, hold on. We're going to get it. There we go. Okay. We got that tied on the nose of the fly. And then finally, the last part of the equation, we're just going to take a couple of pieces of crystal flash in gold. As an antenna for the shrimp. And we're going to put them on top of the crystal, on top of the craft fur. Easy, easy, quick tie. Okay, we got that done. Now we're just gonna just make this head a little bit neater. Whip finish it down. Better try that one more time just to make sure I've got that locked in. There we go. Now I've got it locked in. Okay. Very good. All right, we've got that down there. Now we're going to just give it a little bit of Sally Hansen's on the head to hold everything in place. Or actually, I'd prefer, once again, I'd rather use the light curing adhesive because that stuff is just the best. Put that on there. Nothing with teeth is going to get this thing now. And guys, that's it. Just a simple fly. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take our bodkin and splay out just like you would on a gotcha. We're going to splay out the flash. And guys, the other color to tie this in, we're giving you a tan one right now. We're almost done. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to take a brown Sharpie. We're going to lift up our craft fur. And we're just going to give this thing some bars. And that's it. Really simple, quick tie. It's the Redfish Scampi. We're tying this thing, guys, in a couple of colorways. We tie it in both the tan, and we can also tie it in a rust, in a copper rust color. Really, really great fly for redfish. I've got a guy down in Florida who fishes it all the time, and he's caught sheep's head and shark and redfish and trout and everything will eat it. A snook. It's just a really simple, easy tie. Little Redfish Scampi. So let's see how we're doing on time. We've got about 4 minutes before this feed goes off. So guys, one last fly. I'm not going to tie this, but I'm just going to talk about it. This is going to be coming out with Umpqua this coming next year. This is a fly we call the something else. And if you talk about wanting a fly to match a threadfin shad on lakes, which is, you know, a really, really important fly for lake purposes when it comes to stripers or white bass, this fly has been killer for us. And basically, guys, it's simple. It's a clouser minnow. The whole thing is tied with polar fiber. It's just a polar fiber clouser. It's really, really good. And I'd recommend it. So, guys, that's basically all we got for tonight. Really good fly. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And thank Umpqua again for having us all out here. So you guys have a good night, and we'll see you soon. Go Dogs.